Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Ace on Music. I'm joined as always by my faithful producer Mark and my friend and assistant Sean. So this week I thought that we would tackle a question that both Sean and I get asked all the frickin' time. And that is when a band comes to us and says, how do I get on tour? How do I actually do a tour and get on to a whole thing like that? So I thought it would be fun if we discuss that a little bit and talk about some of the logistics behind touring and getting onto the road. So all three of us have had experience being on the road with bands and touring and seeing how things go behind the scenes, as it were. But getting to in today's day and age, touring is the principal income stream for any working musician. No matter how successful your record sales are, those incomes are going to be dwarfed by the money you're making on the road. And whether that's from ticket sales, merchandise, sponsorships, whatever. But on the lower level, when your bands are starting out, like, how do you get on these tours? You know, you see these old stories about, oh well, you know, Van Halen was touring the U.S. and we got to open for them, and that made everything happen. But that's just not how it works. So, well, not only dues, but you have to. You know, we talk about this a lot. It's the music business. This is all about making money and how you make money. And when a promoter is putting on a show and they're selling tickets, they're doing it to make a profit. They want to make money. So if they have to believe that putting your band on the bill is going to increase their income on this show. And to do that, you need a track record. So what do you think? What do you think is some of the best ways that bands can start building a touring reputation?
Get out there and just do it, right? Like, start traveling, start hitting up clubs, and you're talking from the birth of...
I'm talking from the beginning. I mean, that's where we get asked a lot. I mean, obviously, if you're an established band, you already have got these sort of things figured out, but...
Yeah. Your music speaks volume. Like, if your band's good, and, you know, people want to hear you, people want to see you, you know, go out there. If you can't travel a lot, do local gigs. Go, you know, drive 300-400 miles to a club and book it. It's just like you said in the last episode, you know, about relationships. You know, build that relationship. You know, it's that's what you have to do. You have to get out there.
You're right. The relationships are paramount. And when you do a show, though, the biggest thing that I see as a mistake is that, let's face it, if you're a beginning opening act, there aren't going to be many people in that audience there to see you. Maybe your family and your friends have come to support you, but most people there are waiting for you to get the heck off the stage so that they can see the headliner that they paid to go see. So knowing that, you've got to make an impact.
Well, you know, take advantage of that as well, because if you're a beginning band, you know, get your music tight. Make sure you sound good. Make sure everything's in order. Get that feeling going of when you're going out the road, and, you know, work out your bugs. What's your problems? What you don't like? What you like? You know, how can you deal with no sleep or whatever? You know, even though you might be that band that's not seen first, use that for your advantage.
You nailed it. You know, Mark, you and I have talked about this in the past. It's all about there are no small shows, only small musicians. And I think one of the best examples that I've ever seen of that is there's a band that I'm particularly enamored with called Black Stone Cherry that have been out on Roadrunner for a little while. Now, Black Stone Cherry has had some significant success in Europe, in the UK. Like in the UK, they'll tour arenas. But here, they face the same troubles that almost every band over here faces, and that's the American market is a very difficult one to tackle, and we'll discuss that in a moment. But the thing that blew me away about them, now here's a band that I had seen in arenas in England and really loved their show, and then they come to LA and they're playing the Whiskey, and it was half full. But I'll tell you something, they played that show like they were playing in front of 10,000 people. and the 100 of us or 150 of us that were there or whatever got the show of the night. I mean, they didn't pull any punches. And that show I talk about more than the arena show that I saw, just because it had such a bigger impact on me. What do you think, Mark? Have you ever seen examples of that?
I think it's interesting. We're talking sort of about two different things at once, and one is how do you get on the road, and the second one is how do you do well on the road.
Agreed.
And I don't think we can overstate. I don't think we can overstate the value of those relationships. But the word doesn't mean enough. It doesn't mean what it should mean, because when you know somebody and you could pick up the phone and you could say, "Hey, Brad, I'm coming through town." He's like, "Oh, I'd love to see you." And you're booked. Because you know the guy and because they're inundated. I can't tell you how many. We used to book this place out in Boston, and I probably had 2,000 requests. We couldn't listen to them. You could be great. But I still had to narrow my choices down. And I still had to figure out who to put on the bill. And I had to figure out who was going to open. And you can't distill that by yourself. You need the help of the band, and the band can go to Folk Alliance, South by Southwest. They can go where the booking agents are hanging out and having fun, and you can have a beer with those guys, and you can get to know them and shake their hands so that when you call, you are not in the crowd. I think it's the only way. It's the only way we could do it. Obviously, when you have a bigger name, you're able to cut through some of that because you're able to guarantee them money. But at the lower end of the game, if you don't know them, you don't find a way to know them, you're really putting yourself at a huge disadvantage.
Absolutely true. And I've said this to many of the younger bands that come to me about, like you said, that word relationship, we use it so much, but it can't be overstated about how important that is. We have a friend who's starting to do things with his band, and it's a lot of success they've had locally is rooted in the fact that he has gone out of his way to build relationships with all the local promoters, so that when they have a national coming through their venues and they need somebody to open, to warm the crowd up, they'll call him almost every time and say, because they know that his band is good and that he's a pro and that he'll be there and he'll take care of it. He'll sell tickets, and that is what is the key to taking it to the next level. If you're a junior band, work it like it's a job, because it is, and it's not all beers and girls afterwards. Work it.
It's business. And I'll tell you something, though. We look at the word nepotism like it's a bad word, but it helps us figure out who we can go with. Honestly, if you are not friends with them, you're literally it sounds like schmoozing. It sounds like, oh, it's supposed to be about the music. Well, it is about the music.
It is.
But you still have to find a way to cut through, and you cut through because you find ways of getting to know them, just like any other business in the world. If you have to shake hands, you have to meet somewhere. It could be at your kids' elementary school when the kids are outside and you're talking to people, you're shaking hands, and you're saying, "Wait a second, we have something in common. I happen to be a band, and you happen to be the person who books such and such a club, and that's great. I love your club." And he gives you your card. He says, "Here, you give me a call." Mm-hmm. I mean, that is an essential aspect of how you end up getting somewhere.
I'll take it a step further. We've talked a lot about the relationships that you have to have with the promoters, and that's certainly important. But once you've got past that gatekeeper and you're actually doing the show, it is critical that you treat the venue staff who are working there with respect and kindness, because those people are there every night. And if they have a house sound guy or a house lighting guy who's doing their stuff for you, and you treat him like garbage, or you disrespect them in some way, that means A, they're not going to do a great job for you tonight when they're doing your stuff, which is going to impact your performance, and B, the next time that your band they need a band to open up and somebody suggests your band and the sound guy or the lighting guy goes, "Oh God, not those a-holes,"
I've seen it firsthand. I've seen the band go in there and say fuck off to the lighting guy. Well, that lighting guy's brother owns the club, which manages this band, and he's part of the whiskey and he promotes part of the whiskey. And the word gets out, these guys are not playing other days.
Yeah, well, this is it. It's all about relationships. I'm going to keep repeating that until it's driven home into people's heads. So.
It's the last debate. Relationships are important.
Now, when you start getting yourself out there and you start establishing yourself, now remember, I'm gonna emphasize this again because it's going to lead into what I'm going to talk about now. This is a business, and if the promoters start looking at you as a source of revenue for what they're doing, you're going to get more work. Once you start establishing yourself that way and you put the work in, you start going out and doing small regional tours by building the relationships you have, that's when you start getting the interest of an agent. Now, an agent is somebody who a band or a manager of a band hires in order to book the shows for a particular artist. But agents, just like anybody else, they are in this to make money. So if agent's not going to represent you if he doesn't think that he's going to get commissions off of you. So it is. And let me tell you, a great agent can either make or break a band. I mean, if you have a great agent, because they also have relationships. There's that word again. They have relationships with other bands. Usually, if they're part of an agency, then they have other bands in their agency. And it behooves them, in order to have their own artists tour together, because then they get all the commissions on all of the fees rather than just on some of them. So they have a lot of influence over that sort of thing. And so agents are very, very important. And in fact, my business partner Adam and I, we often talk about agents, and the great ones are the ones who are almost like part of our management team. They understand the vision for the future. They understand what we're trying to do with the bands, and they're a critical component in the success of a band. But getting that agent in the first place, you've got to show them that you're worthy of it. That's what it boils down to. And I know that sounds arrogant and everything, but they only have so many hours in the day, just like us, and you're going to maximize the money that you're going to make off of that. So
Bottom line, your band should kick ass.
your bottom line, your band needs to kick ass. So
Make sure you kick ass in your music. That's
what do you think about that, Mark?
Yeah,
That's the first ingredient, but
the band should be great.
But I mean, I also just want to say, as part of that, if you are lucky enough to get your band on that stage, you have to put a little thought into what sort of a band are you on stage. So often I just see these new bands, and they finally get that break, and they go up on that stage, and they're dressed just like they don't give a crap, in their jeans and tore up T-shirts and their old.
overdressed for the music they're playing.
Well, I don't often see that, but I see them underdressed a lot, and they put no effort into how the stage looks and how everything is set up. Remember that everything matters. Everything is another block in this building that you're building, and you got to stop and think about every single step of the way. So
yeah, it's interesting. I've been witness to a handful of this, and I find it. I understand the dilemma. I understand the idea that the artist, by his or her very nature, is an artist, and gets to decide what that art is, and the audience is merely a spectator when it comes to that. That said, I think it's disrespectful to the audience to not help give the audience what they're paying for.
yes,
And whether it's, and I've seen this at the highest levels. And I mean, I was witness to an Elvis Costello show and a Bob Dylan show that I found were just horrifying when it came to what I felt was the disrespect, and a lot of mid-level artists. But I've also seen it at the lowest level. Oh, I'm not in the mood to tell stories tonight, so I'm just going. If you don't mind, I'm just going to sit and play. Well, that you're taking away what the audience is coming in for. That was a relationship. That was an interaction that was critical. And the idea is that a performer performs, an entertainer entertains, and the audience is paying good money, even if they're not paying a lot of money for the ticket. that night is costing them dinner and drinks and everything else, and they're investing their entire night in you as the cornerstone of what's going to make that night worthwhile for them.
Couldn't have put it better myself. I mean, it is in today's day and age with like we talked earlier about how the whole model of the industry has flipped to where touring is where the majority of their income stream is coming from now. Well, as a result of that, artists are charging, and promoters and everything has the cost of doing these shows has gone up and up, and so ticket prices have gone up and up. And with some of the national acts, some of the big name acts that you see, whether it be your Roger Waters or your Fleetwood Macs or your ELOs or whoever, they charge a pretty penny for their ticket. And you know, it might cost you, for a really good ticket in the house, it might cost you $200-300 plus. If you decide to indulge in VIP experiences or things like that, it can be even more. Bottom line is, you know, when you start adding merchandise and drinks and dinner and parking into it, you're looking at $1,000 for a night on the town. And so I don't know about you, but $1,000 is a lot for a night out for me. and so I think it is for the average person. And so they're not going to be going to as many shows as maybe people used to back in the day, because it's just, you only got so much disposable income. So what I keep telling bands is that if you're going to get up on that stage, especially if you're a new band that's getting your shot at opening for somebody else where nobody's really there, this is your chance. You have a blank slate. You can go up there and literally wow the people. The big success for those bands is always, for me, when I hear the people going out or I read the reviews afterwards of the show and they can't stop talking about this opening band and how spectacular they were. Yeah. That's the key. That's what you got to do to get to, you know, to start moving up to the next level.
And of course, making it easy on the headliner.
Right.
Yes.
It's funny because the marvelous Miss Maisel, I don't know if you or anybody else has seen that, but she pissed off the headliner and got fired from the tour. You know, the idea is that you are not there for you. You're there as a bridge, and you are there to connect that headliner to that audience, and that's why you were hired. And while you should do everything and be great, that your job is to make the show ultimately better, right, to make sure that people have a better time, and to make sure that the headliner is ultimately doing a better job themselves. And in some genres, you know, that you're rewarded by getting to go up on stage with the headliner.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You know, especially in the singer-songwriter and the folk market, where that's automatic. If you're there as an opener, you do go up on stage with the headliner at the end.
We got, usually 30, 45 minutes at the most? Like, you know.
At the most, yeah.
That's not a very long time.
No.
Kick fucking ass and take names in that 30 minutes of your band. I mean, that's what you're put up there for.
Couldn't have put it better myself. Yeah. I mean, it is. And Mark, I really want to emphasize something that you said, because it's so important, and that is to show respect to the headliner. I mean, so many times I see these junior bands get a shot opening for a national, and they go in there and they act like idiots, and they just piss these people off and pretty much guarantee that they're never going to get another shot at opening for a band on this level. Be respectful, put on the best show that you're possibly capable of, and hope that you make a connection with the audience. What else can you say?
And say thank you. You can say thank you.
Hell yeah.
You can actually use those words, and because it is a favor. You're doing it for the living, and you're getting your exposure, you're doing all that other stuff, but they don't need to choose you.
Unless you're better.
Well, careful about that, but
well, I'm just saying, a lot of history has shown a lot of bands, that started out.
Yeah, but I mean, everybody gets their opportunities. But I mean, I think that the other thing that I'm gonna throw out there for these, especially for junior bands, and I see it happen so often. If you get your shot at opening for a national locally or whatever, remember that they're in the same business as you, and I'm going back to our favorite word, relationships. If you go in there and you have the opportunity to meet them and spend some time with them, don't pull the whole fan card and just, slobber all over them and ask them about what was happening when this album was written or whatever. Build an actual relationship with them. Get to they actually know who you are, and that you have possibly get email exchanges and stuff, so that you can keep and start building this bevy of people who know who you are and know that your band can deliver. And you know, you can reach out to when you see that their band is coming to town, saying, "Hey, remember us? We opened for you 2 years ago. I see you're playing down the road in a couple of weeks. Do you need somebody to open again? We'd love to see you." And it's all about the relationships. So, but another thing that I wanted to talk about, just because it's kind of related to this, is that once a band really starts touring, you lose a lot of control over your environment. Obviously, you're in a different space every night. You're in a different hotel room every night. You're in a different city every night. You lose a lot of control over your environment, and so that's why bands have these things called tour riders, which are basically part of the deal that they make with a promoter, where it says that we need certain things in order to give the show that you're paying for. And those things can be as diverse as, you know, technical requirements about lighting and power and things like that, down to what they want in their dressing room. Now, the first thing I want to say about tour riders that really seems to be lost on bands, even really experienced bands, and that is that all of that stuff, everything that's on that rider that you're demanding for your dressing room, that is all coming out of your pocket, because that is a show expense, and they don't care. I mean, if they're going to pay you, you know, $500 to do a show tonight, and you demand $450 worth of stuff in your dressing room, well, then you're getting $50 to play tonight, because they're not going to give you all that stuff for free.
Correct me if I'm wrong, it wasn't always like that, right? Like, it used to be the label would pay for a lot of that stuff. Right?
Never believe that a label pays for anything. Anything that they pay on behalf of a band, they're going to charge back. That's why so many of those bands from the earlier days are millions of dollars unrecouped, because, you know, everything would just get thrown onto their bill. It's just ridiculous. And when you're paying back then, you know, so much money to do videos and even the promotional tours and the limos and all that, the label's all charging it back, you know. So, but touring riders are really important, because there are certain things that you need on a daily basis. Like, for example, Uriah Heep, one of the bands that I manage, the singer Bernie Shaw has a very powerful voice, and before every show, he needs to prepare that voice in order to perform. And something that he's found very effective is drinking hot water that has lemon and ginger in it. So on our tour rider, there's a thing that says, you know, 45 minutes before stage, we got to have a kettle, water, fresh ginger, lemons, honey, whatever he needs to make his tea concoction, because it's going to affect the show if we don't have that stuff. And if, you know, we're in, you know, the middle of nowhere, Oregon or whatever, and playing a show, we don't know where to go get that stuff. We don't have people who can run out and buy that stuff. But I mean, tour riders in themselves can get out of hand, and I mean, there's whole conversations we can have about the crazy stuff people have done with tour riders. But the tour rider itself is a very important part of touring. But remember that everything that goes on there, it's not free. It's not like you're saying, oh, well, you know, ask them for 10 bottles of Jack Daniels and we'll just take them on the bus. Well, you're paying for every one of those bottles. But you know, and tour riders are actually can be kind of fun too. I mean, I've seen some great ones. There's a great website called thesmokinggun.com, which lists a whole bunch of tour riders, and you should go check it out if this sort of thing interests you. You can see some of the crazy stuff that people ask for. But I particularly recommend the Iggy Pop one. Great reading. But the Foo Fighters too, they have a great one. But more or less, all that we're asking for is what we need to do the show, and because we're not going out into the world to bring that. And I mean, obviously, some of the things we bring with us that are just very difficult. A small example: when we used to tour with Motorhead, we would Lemmy would always want to have 2 packs of Marlboros waiting for him when he came to the dressing room. Well, tobacco is something that is a difficult thing to deal with promoters sometimes. Some of them have policies where they will not provide tobacco on their rider. So, well, whether it's their own philosophies or local law or whatever, some corporate policies just won't give cigarettes, maybe because they don't allow smoking in the building or whatever. But let me tell you, if those 2 packs of smokes weren't sitting there when he came into the dressing room, you could pretty much guarantee it was going to be a crappy day because he was going to be in a bad mood from the moment go. No, so we would always make sure that we were carrying a few cartons of those things so that if a promoter had forgotten or screwed up or whatever, that we could just quickly slip them in to cover our own butts. So. But no, I mean, there's also a certain point where even at the lowest levels, something we talk about almost as much as relationships is perception. Perception is the key to getting your band to the next level. And part of that perception is looking like you're bigger than you actually are before you are. So what I mean by that is if you go into a venue and you have somebody who's acting as a tour manager, who's running the show, directing things, liaising with the venue, whatever, even if it's your best bud who's helping out and he has a head for this sort of thing, it really gives the signal to the people involved that your organization is got it together. You've got people in charge of certain things. It's not like a chicken running around with its head cut off. So now, that being said, I'm going to slip back to riders for a moment. Now, you've done your fair amount of backstage time. What is some of the? Do you have anything that you can remember from riders that was an issue? Yeah, I mean that actually brings up a point. There are certain riders that I've dealt with where the band members want very specific bottles of alcohol, and
Bottles of wine.
well, not even being expensive. It's just they want a specific kind. And well, when you're an international touring band, well, not every country has every kind of wine, and so we actually have to structure the rider so that it says, well, this is what we prefer, but if you can't get this, we'll take this or this or this, and that kind of thing. So anyway, that is a primer on what I suggest you do to get your band on tour. And remember that it's a job. Remember that you got to put everything into it. This isn't, if you want to make it, it's not a hobby, it's a job. And that's what I have to say about that. So, Mark, do you have anything else you want to add to that?
To which part?
Anything about how do you get your band to go on tour?
I mean, we've done whole seminars on how to get your band on tour, where we talked about very isolated components. I think though that the one thing I would add to this whole thing, because you mentioned perception and then you mentioned riders, and the rider is a power play. And obviously, when you're dealing with 2 packs of cigarettes and there may be a desire because of someone who wants to smoke, but making someone else do that is a position of power. And I find, especially as you go down in the ranks, the lower you get, you find that little asks make it so that you'll never play there again. Mm-hmm. And as you go up to the next level, you find the venues just ignore the rider.
Yes.
And the reason why they do that is because it is very much a power play. And they will agree to provide that stuff, and then you will show up, and the stuff won't be there because they think you're full of crap. And you can play or not. Mm-hmm. And you will always play.
Yes.
And I think that destroys your credibility as an artist. It makes it so that when it comes time to negotiate the rate or the guarantee or the way you're going to handle certain aspects of the show, and you've gotten slaughtered because you asked for something stupid, mm-hmm. and then you ended up not getting it and playing anyway, and you can't walk away. You walk away, no one will book you.
Yeah.
And so I think that riders are a fun way of talking about the contract. And the contract itself does have to be handled gingerly. You have to know what's important, really important. The stuff that you make a living from, the way you sell the merch, the way you can interact with the crowd. Those are the things that are going to make your band bigger. Again, I'm not talking about the Motorhead. I'm going down.
Yeah.
But you need to go back and you need to build an audience and you need all those things. And if you're asking for stupid stuff or you're making a big deal out of stupid stuff, I promise those people, they have other choices.
You know, you mentioned something there a moment ago, which is another really important part of the rider, besides the food and beverage and all that stuff, is the technical aspects of the show that are now. I think most people at this point have heard the famous stories about on Van Halen's rider. There was a famous clause that said that they had to have a bowl of M&Ms in their dressing room, but it could only have brown M&Ms or no brown M&Ms. If it wasn't there. Now, what most people just think that was some kind of rock star arrogance, you know, where they were trying to pull, like you said, their power play. But it really wasn't. It actually, if you ever look at the rider itself, it is the requirement for the bowl of M&Ms is buried deep in the technical aspects of the rider. It isn't in the food and beverage section. It's deep in the technical thing. And the tour manager who did that for them did it because he knew that if he walked into that dressing room in the morning and there was brown M&Ms in the bowl, that the promoter hadn't read the technical contract, and then they were be in danger, and they needed to address that as nobody had looked at their technical requirements. So that was why he did that. He buried it in there for that reason. And of course, most people don't hear that part of the story, but that's why they did it. So anyway, I want to thank both Mark and Sean for joining me on the show today. And I want to thank all of you for your continued support. Remember, we're always looking for your feedback. You can send it to acetalksmusic@gmail.com. We also have our Ace on Music After Hours show, which appears on the patreon.com platform. You can see the link in the description below of this video. Come join us over there and see what we talk about after the show. And until next time, take care of yourself.